Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker, Casey, and a few bits of usual business. Anyone who follows, likes, and comments or retweets on any of my social media content across November will be automatically entered into a monthly memoir giveaway. This month, we are featuring Helen Zuman's book, Mating in Captivity, about her time on Zendik Farm. If you have read Helen's work, please head on over to Amazon or Goodreads to leave her a review. I know it would mean a lot to the both of us. You can find me at Cult Vault Pod across all social medias. I've had an overwhelming amount of emails lately from people looking to share their story, and this is absolutely incredible. For anyone looking to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. And I've just reached 600 subscribers on YouTube, and it would be really helpful if anyone could head over there and subscribe to my channel, The Cult Vault. And if you have spare 5 minutes, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, because this will help to move the show up the algorithm so that other people can find it easily. Lastly, a huge thank you to Ethan, who has subscribed to a year's worth of exclusive content through my redcircle.com page. Thank you so much for being here, for sponsoring the show, and for helping me to keep these weekly episodes going. Now on to the show. Today we have Rachel from the Élan School here to shed light on the programme that used to exist, that took influence from Synanon and other troubled teen facilities that have been equally problematic. Rachel's story is a difficult one, with themes of abuse and references to self-harm and suicide, though her road to recovery is an incredible one, and so inspiring. Please see the episode description for resources, but for now, here is Rachel. Hello, Rachel, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today and agreeing to share your story on something that we've talked about a lot on the show already, but needs to be talked about more. So would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Hey, listeners. My name's Rachel Searle. I live in New Zealand. I've been living in New Zealand for the past 6 years. I'm originally from, Massachusetts in Georgia, but I live here in New Zealand now.
And just in case any of the listeners are wondering why the audio sounds a little bit strange, it's just because Rachel is recording in her car currently, just to protect her young children from some of the themes and topics that we're going to be discussing today. So just in case anybody was wondering about that. So this is something we've talked about quite often on the show, but it is a new subject, and this particular school that we're going to mention is one that has been a hot topic of conversation when people talk about therapeutic boarding schools. But you were somebody who was placed into one of these programs.
That's correct.
And what was the name of the therapeutic boarding school that you attended?
The Elan School, which was located in Poland Springs, Maine.
Do you know roughly when this particular boarding school opened and who opened it?
I actually had to do a little research for this. But it was opened in 1970 as a private modification program and boarding school. And it was opened by a child psychologist named Gerald Davidson and a person named Joe Ritchie.
And it's my understanding that people involved with opening this school had some ties to Synanon as well. Is that right?
That is correct. Synanon, if you're not familiar with it, was founded in 1958 by Charles E. Dieterich, and it was located in Santa Monica, California. And Synanon's approach to the rehab for drug addiction was with tough love.
And a lot of the shouting therapy that we've talked about on this show, it kind of originated from Synanon itself.
Yes, attack therapy is what it was coined at, and from my research, it was originally used. I think it was thought up in maybe the 1960s or 70s. Don't quote me on that though, but it was used for couples who were married that were leaning towards divorce, and they used it for couples to kind of, get their strong feelings off, hopefully to come back together. So the whole idea of attack therapy, when it was used at my school, was very warped. It was kind of overused.
Right.
And it wasn't what it was meant to be for.
So Synanon is created by Charles Diedrich. It's established. It is praised by a lot of people at some point. It even has a film made after itself. It's in all of the newspapers. Yes, yep. It's on all the papers. It has celebrity endorsement. Things take a bit of a dark turn when the cult-like methods of control start to become noticeable, like encouraged or perhaps even enforced vasectomies and abortions, shaved heads, regimented regimes and uniforms, parents being actively separated from their children. There was an army within the group that was being trained to go out and be the front line of the group and protect the group. And by this point, they were living almost on a commune, very insular community at this point, with attack therapy, which they called the game, primarily at the core center of Synanon at this point. And I have covered this extensively for anybody that hasn't listened and wants to go back and listen to the introduction to Synanon and the troubled teen industry, very early on episodes. So they probably don't sound particularly polished by this stage of the podcast.
When we did them, we called them encounter groups, and they were done twice a week on Monday and Friday.
Encounter groups, right? Interesting. So similar take on the game, just changed basically the name of the activity to give it the new identity for the Élan School specifically.
They wanted to probably shine it up for parents.
So
make it sound more therapeutic.
we've got Synanon established, and then from Synanon there's 2 or 3 quote therapeutic boarding schools that open that use the same model as Synanon. One of them is Daytop.
Daytop. Yep, let's talk about Daytop. It was modeled after Synanon's practices, and this is when Joe Ritchie comes into play. Do you want me to talk about Joe Ritchie?
Absolutely, yes, please do.
Okay, so Joe Ritchie was arrested. He was arrested a couple times before he landed at Daytop, but at age 18, this is in 1963, he was arrested for robbing a mail truck. And so he went to court, and the judge gave him a choice. He said, you can go to jail for 7 years, or you can go to a rehabilitation center for 2 years. So he wasn't a dummy. He chose rehab, and that rehab was Daytop Village. And that's where he went, and that's where Elan started to grow, to bloom in his head.
So straight away there, just from that kind of small summary that you've given, we can see how Daytop was modeled and created by somebody who was heavily involved in Synanon. And then Joe Ritchie has attended Daytop, and he has experienced essentially Synanon, but for teenagers and young adults.
He was a drug addict. He was a heroin user. And so he went to Daytop, and he was quite the leader there. He was looked upon as a leader, and he probably had never really been looked upon that way in his life. So I think that gave him, the sense of, maybe like authority. And he thought, well, I can carry this on into something. So I think that's the momentum that he carried with him to start Elan.
So instead of having one of these traumatizing and abusive experiences, he has had an empowering experience, which has led him to open up the Élan School.
Correct.
Okay, so you mentioned that Joe Ritchie himself, he was arrested for robbing a truck and he had problems with heroin addiction. And a lot of the people that we see go through the troubled teen industry do have problems with alcohol or drugs, or sometimes have just tried it for the first time and unfortunately find themselves in a position where their parents think they need this level of intervention, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about a bit further down the line. But would you mind sharing with us the reasons why you were sent to this program?
That's a very long story. You want to hear it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I'll try and abridge it a little bit. When I started high school, I struggled a lot in school. When I was 13, I was diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive, which, wasn't the hyperactivity part of it. It was the inattentive part where you're kind of like spacey and a daydreamer. So my parents chose to put me on medication, which, Ritalin was what they were using back in the 90s. So I started doing a lot better in school. But by the time I got to high school, my home life was very erratic. My parents, they fought a lot, and I just didn't take well to authority. And I'm not saying at school, I'm saying with my parents. When they told me to do something, I usually did the opposite, and I was very stubborn. So my first year of high school was done at my town's high school, and my parents saw that I wasn't doing great there, and I really wasn't. I mean, I wasn't doing really bad, but like it was the first time I had smoked marijuana, and I was smoking cigarettes, which they looked, very down on, and my grades were really struggling. So they decided that for sophomore year, they were going to send me to a private school. Now, this is not where I go to Elan. This is they sent me to a private school a couple towns away. It was a liberal arts private school, very, very like, hippie-ish, very into arts. And, you called your teachers by their first names, and it wasn't the right place for me. Needless to say, I probably needed structure. So I was at the school, and I was just skipping class. I started smoking more marijuana. I was drinking. I was doing a bit of stealing, not from people, like from I was like shoplifting, and sometimes I would steal alcohol from bars. So all this was going on, and the school eventually caught on. This is the fancy artsy fartsy school, caught on, and they essentially wanted me out. And one of my friends had actually told them that I was snorting my Ritalin, which was 100% the truth. So the school said, you're not invited to come back next year. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yeah, I always say that it's your story, so you tell it however you wish.
Okay. The shit hit the fan at home, and I should also mention this too. I was starting to engage in a lot of self-harm behavior, and I was cutting myself, and by the time that the school, we have this big school meeting at this private school, it was just done. The shit had hit the fan. So I went home. My parents were so pissed at me because they did not know all this was going on. I was like months behind in schoolwork. I wasn't attending class. I basically given up. Like a lot of my friends had turned on me. I was very depressed. So at the time I was actually on Prozac, and I overdosed on my Prozac. I took a bunch of Prozac. I went and burned my skin with with cigarettes, and I didn't want to die though, even though I had taken this huge overdose. I just wanted to get out of myself, get out of this moment, this hell that I was in. So I actually called 911 myself and said, I just took a ton of Prozac, an overdose. I need to get to the hospital. So my dad heard this conversation, and I think he ended up taking me to the hospital. And yeah, it was bad. They ended up having to pump my stomach. I don't remember a lot of being in the hospital, but at one point I was in the ICU, which I didn't realize was really bad at the time. I was only 16 and never really been in a hospital before. And I kept having these doctors come in saying, why would you want to kill yourself? Why did you try and kill yourself? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I was a teenager. I was living it from moment to moment. And so, I got released from the hospital and sent straight to a psychiatric ward, but it was a really good psychiatric ward. I don't know if people have heard of Boston Children's Hospital. It's an excellent hospital, and they sent me to the psychiatric ward there for children. So that was my first visit to the psychiatric ward. I was there for probably 10 days. They probably adjusted my medication and sent me home. So I come home. I've got no school to go to. My parents are not happy with me. They don't know how to talk to me. They don't know it. They're trying to get me through this, but they're at a complete loss because I'm a wreck. So within the course of the next month, I had done some severe cutting and ended up back in the psych ward twice. But this was a different psych ward. This psych ward wasn't very nice. It was, it wasn't like Children's Hospital. It was, so after the second psych ward, I have no school that I'm attending. My parents realized that I cannot come home because every time I come home, I do something that ends me back in the psych ward. And I actually, at one point, in between going to the psych ward the second time and the third time, told my parents, because I was just lost. I said, listen, I want you guys to find me someplace where I am safe. So essentially, I asked to go to Elan, but I didn't know it was Elan. I just asked for someplace where I would be safe, where I could go to school, where they could help me. I knew my life was a problem. I knew I wasn't safe. I wanted someplace to feel safe, but I didn't know what place that was. So let's get back to the second time in the psych ward. My parents started visiting schools, basically therapeutic boarding schools that I would attend. And I visited one in Massachusetts. It seemed okay. Compared to Elan, it was a cakewalk, like not as regimented. They had rules like about stuff, but not as strict as Elan. It was more, I would say it was more therapeutic in a therapy sort of way, where they were actually trying to help you with your problems. But my parents felt like that wasn't right for me. And then my dad drove up to Maine. Now, we were living in Boston at the time, so it was 2.5 hour drive up to Poland Springs, Maine. And when he visited there, I wasn't with him. I was still in the psych ward, but he visited while they were having, like, he did a tour, and the tour was during a graduation, and that just sold him, because the graduations at Elan are just, I mean, they're really powerful because there's so much emotion, and they're like, look how far this person has come, and everyone's crying, and the parents are crying, and everyone's hugging, and it's just it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So that sold him on it. And I remember they brought me a catalog of Elan, and it was obviously meant for students that were, they wanted to show students, prospective students. And I remember seeing this picture of a girl, and it was like in front of a picnic table, and she was wearing a tie-dye t-shirt. And I was like, oh, this place doesn't look so bad. They have a lake, they had all these activities that they did. I thought it was going to be like summer camp kind of, like I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And not like it was my choice, but they made it seem like, they wanted me to be okay with it because they still loved me. And I wasn't to a point where, because I know some people that got sent to Elan got ripped out of their beds by two, thugs and taken there in handcuffs. That wasn't my situation. They wanted me to be okay with it because my parents loved me, and they wanted it to be okay. So that's essentially how I got to Elan. Was I said I wanted to go someplace where I'd be safe, and they thought they found the place where I'd be safe. They were sold, and they sold me on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that's quite common with these stories that we hear, especially in terms of parents basically being lied to about the places, that the intentions behind a lot of these programs that appeared to be one thing, and actually once the kids are dropped off and left there, turn out to be something completely different.
These organizations pry on parents that are desperate, that desperately love their children and just want them to be safe and okay. And that's all my parents wanted. They would have done anything, put me anywhere, because they had a daughter who was trying to kill herself. They had a daughter who had cuts all over her arms and legs. And, it was very traumatic for them. They just wanted me to be safe. And the school said she will be safe here. So that was it.
Yeah.
It sealed my coffin, so to say.
And they've done their research, and they have the reading materials, like the leaflets, and they've come away with information, read up about the program, and spoken to people. And so on the surface, it really does seem like it's the type of place where you're going to get help. They've spoken to you about it. You've looked at the reading material, and you've said, actually, yeah, do you know what? This does look like the kind of place that will help me. So all together as a family unit, you have all agreed that maybe this is the place where you will be safe and where you will receive that intervention that you need.
Yes. I knew I needed help, and I knew my parents couldn't give it to me. So I saw this as the best option. But I didn't know. I was 16. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't. But even if I did, I probably wouldn't have had a choice at that time. They're already. This is where you're going. They wanted me to be safe, and this is where I was going to be safe for myself.
And from what you've told us, at this point, it was life or death in some ways.
It was life
you receiving help.
I didn't actually think I wanted to die, but a lot of times people will take these overdoses and they will die. So that, I'm a mother now, so I can kind of see how they must have felt, what I was putting them through. And it must have been scary as hell. And, they just wanted me to be safe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the school promised them that I would be safe.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also common in a lot of these interviews that we've had on the show, where people did need some type of professional intervention. They did need some type of professional assistance to help them overcome or manage or develop a skill set to help themselves overcome whatever it is that they were experiencing at this moment in their lives. Unfortunately, what seemed to happen is that you all ended up in places that actually only bolstered those difficulties that you were all experiencing. And the Elan School is no exception when it comes to institutionalized abuse and private companies making money off of the backs of child abuse, basically.
Exactly. Joe Ritchie, it's taken me years to realize this. I left the school 22 years ago, and I've come to realize this was a way to make money. It was a scam, basically. He preyed on desperate parents, promised they would be safe, and charged parents thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to have their kids here. This wasn't like a nice fancy boarding school where you've got these really nice dorms. This was rough. Like, it was the campus. A lot of it was trailers. We slept in these, we used to call them World War II bunker beds, because there were these metal framed beds, and it wasn't like, the money wasn't being put into the school. The money was being put somewhere else. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And I think that there's actually been some cases of judges being charged because they were found to be, they were actually found to be putting children and young adults into these programs to financially benefit themselves.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm definitely sure of that. Joe Ritchie, he was very political. He, I think he ran for office at one point. He had, a lot of people in his pocket, and he was a con artist, and this was just a source of money for him. That's all it was. And, the state of Maine would inspect the school, but they would always call before they showed up. They wouldn't just show up. They would call first. And then, when they did show up, we got to put on a performance for them of how we don't do the things that we do every day, that we are, everyone's needs are getting taken care of, that we're not having these things that were actually very abusive.
Yeah. It's all very shiny and happy and productive and proactive on the surface, and basically all a ruse and all an act.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned briefly before the cost of the program, and in the documentary that we'll discuss a bit more later, they do actually say that some of these wilderness programs and therapeutic boarding schools charge more for residents to attend and for young adults to basically be forced through these programs than some of the top universities charge in America.
When I went there, they were charging $44,000 annually, and that was around year 2000. Now, I have to say, my parents got my school system to pay for it. I don't know how they did it, but they got my school system to pay for it. So they weren't out of pocket for my tuition there. A lot of the kids there came from very wealthy families, and were just, they weren't like heroin addicts. They weren't like, alcoholics. They just did something that, maybe they talked back or they swore. Maybe their parents caught them smoking, weed for the first time and said, oh my God, my kid needs help. And that was a lot of the kids there. And then some kids were sent by the state too. So those were the ones that, were more in the judicial system.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's very dodgy in the sense that doctors, judges, therapists, probation officers, a lot of these people have been found to work on a commission basis in terms of referring young adults into these programs for professional intervention, when actually they are not receiving anything helpful by attending these programs, but those people that have referred these young people in will receive monetary contributions, and then obviously the Elan School earns a lot of money, like you've just mentioned before, from having these people participate in the programs full time.
I don't believe my school was part of that though, because I was the first person that they sent there, and I consider my school system, the town that I lived in was 20 minutes outside of Boston. It was considered a very wealthy town, but I don't think that they were, I don't think they were part of that.
So you mentioned that you were 16 when you first entered the program, and you were lucky enough to not be one of these people who was taken in the night by a what's the word they use?
Hoodlum, thug.
yeah. You were lucky enough to be somebody that wasn't taken in the night by a hired escort service.
Yeah, that's it. My dad. Yeah, no, I wasn't. My dad picked me up from the psychiatric ward, said goodbye to my mom and brother, and then he drove me up to Maine. And it was a very somber experience, as I remember it. We didn't talk very much going up there.
And do you remember what you packed in your suitcase or your bag to take with you?
I didn't pack anything. My parents packed for me.
Okay. When you finally arrive in Maine at the school itself, what are your first impressions of the building, the grounds?
Where the fuck am I? Excuse my language. Where the fuck am I? He pulls up to what looks like a trailer park. Doesn't look like a school, I was thinking, because I had just come from a school that, was, like an artsy fartsy rich kind of school. And this looks like a trailer park out in East Bumfuck nowhere. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is not what I thought it was. So, yeah.
It looked different in real life than it did on the brochures?
Well, in the brochures, they didn't have any pictures of the trailers and, all that. The trailers were actually used as office spaces. We didn't live in trailers. We lived in houses, basically. But yeah, the office part of it was all these trailers.
And is it very rural? Because a lot of these programs tend to be
it was out in the middle
isolated.
of nowhere. You had to drive through Shaker Village. I don't know if you know what Shakers are, but they're kind of like Amish. And you drove past this Shaker Village, and then you drove up to number 5 road, and it was down that way. It was down past like a field. And then all of a sudden there's this big, like almost rotary, but that was the campus, and it was situated around this rotary.
And when you arrive there, do you have staff or residents come out to greet you?
We go into the office, and they kind of have I don't know if she was the administrative person there, and she kind of sits and talks to me and my dad, and she's very serious. And I had this pillow that I wanted to take with me. It was very special. I had a very close relationship with my grandparents growing up, and this pillow was from their house, and this was like my comfort. And I thought I'd be able to have this pillow with me, and they took it off me, and I never saw it again. And so they had a staff member from my house that I was going to be in, and two residents come up to take me down. So and I said goodbye to my dad, and it was like I stepped out of reality.
What was the experience like saying goodbye to him? Did you know how long you wouldn't see him for at this point?
I knew it was going to be a while. I didn't know it was going to be that. Like, I thought it was going to be 3 months, but it ended up being a lot longer than 3 months that I would see him again. But, our relationship with my father was so detached at that time anyway. I feel like he almost didn't view me the same way because of everything I'd gone through. So I just, I kind of felt on my own anyway. Like, it wasn't, you think it would be this big moment where, we'd wrap the arms around each other and be crying, but it wasn't like that. I think he wanted to get out of there because it was hard on him. And he knew. Yeah. And so we said our goodbye, and they wanted him to go. They were like, okay, yeah, we're taking her down, because they didn't want, to drag out. They wanted to get me getting in there and, get into the program.
And when you finally have a moment with staff or residents where your father is no longer there, does the tone start to change? Does anything do red flags start popping up? Because that's often what we hear. As soon as the parents are no longer on the grounds, things start to change, and the veil is almost lifted. So you start to see some of the darker things that happen in these schools.
Yeah, they take me down the hill to the house I'm supposed to be in. And the first thing they do is take me to the bathroom. Now, the bathroom is basically 3 showers, 3 toilet stalls, 3 sinks. It's not a very big bathroom. And the staff member tells me to take off all my clothes. Now, they do this in jail, don't they? Like, strip down and cough. I didn't have to cough, but I was very modest at the time. I didn't, I wasn't one to like get naked in front of people I don't know. So that was really hard for me. But I did it, and they put you in the shower, and they give you, we called it nix. It's basically if you've got lice, like they want, you to nix your hair, so you don't have lice. And then they give you, not the clothes that you're wearing, but clothes that you can, like my parents packed for me, and that's what I got dressed in.
I recently had a conversation with another person who attended 2 different therapeutic boarding schools, kind of one after the other, and we had a lengthy discussion about why she had a cavity search at such a young and vulnerable age. And we basically decided that it was purely, especially because she'd gone from one program straight to another. So there was no opportunity for her to have smuggled anything in, basically. She didn't come from home. She didn't come from, regular public school where she may have been able to access illegal substances or contraband whether that's chocolate or headphones or whatever it is that she wasn't allowed in that first program. We had this discussion about why the cavity search in the second program was the first experience that she basically had once she got there. And we both decided that it's the first step towards breaking you down once you arrive there. It's got nothing to do with you potentially smuggling in something that you're not supposed to have. It's the first power play that the staff inflict on you, and sets
control,
the tone.
isn't it?
Absolutely sets the tone for the rest of your experience there.
I remember the staff member telling me to take my clothes off. I remember, this is 1997, and I still have this memory. She said, "You need to take all your clothes off in front of me." And I remember saying to her, "But I'm a little bit modest."
Yeah. And you're 16 and you're vulnerable.
That shows how innocent I still am, and I've got all these, cuts, these fresh cuts all over my body, and I felt utterly disgusted with myself in that moment. Pure shame to myself.
And how upsetting is that for you to be so concerned and worried about how you look and how you feel in that moment, to not even be able to question why it is you're being asked to take your clothes off in front of somebody you've only just met. Your father's just left you. You think you're going to have to wait 3 months to see him again. You don't know where you are. You don't know anybody at all. And instead of saying or thinking to yourself, why am I being asked to remove all of my clothes? You don't need me to be naked to see if I've got lice in my hair. Like, you're so worried about yourself, and you're so vulnerable in that moment that you can only think and feel those things about yourself. And I wonder how many people had that same thought process and had those same feelings, and how many people your experience applies to, where they didn't have a minute to question why they were being asked to do what they did.
I don't know. I know from that point on, I started to do a lot of dissociating, where I was almost on autopilot. And I think that's how I survived in the program, because I do have memories of it. And it's funny how your mind works. And a lot of people will be mad, because a lot of people, I've got bad memories of Elan too, but I do have these good memories. But every day-to-day things, I don't really remember. Like, I was the person who would, bring people, new residents down, and have to stand there while they got in the shower naked. But I don't remember who, I don't remember when, I don't really remember doing it. I knew I did it, but I don't have those specific memories, because a lot of my time there, I was in a dissociation. Like, I just was on autopilot. And I think that kind of saved me, being in that space.
So you arrived there, you've had personal possessions that mean a lot to you taken from you that you never see again. You have had this very vulnerable and abusive experience inflicted on you.
Oh, that was just the tip of the iceberg. And getting, naked. I don't even consider that, that's very low on the totem pole of
which is wild. It's absolutely
it is.
It's like
Isn't
incomprehensible it that you brush that off as such a like a non-event, because it's such a huge thing, and it's such a violation, and that speaks volumes to the amount of abuse that people must experience in these programs. If to you that interaction was basically minuscule.
Yeah, it's minuscule.
So
absolutely,
once you are introduced to where you're going to be sleeping, and kind of the routine is explained to you, what is the average day and week like for a resident of the Élan School?
Well, when you get there, you have no trust. They don't trust you at all. So they put somebody they call it ST, which stands for support person, but they're also a big sister. You have a big sister on you that shadows you for about, I don't know, 2 weeks. It could be longer if you're misbehaving. So I have somebody constantly with me, following me, watching me. When I have to go to the bathroom, I have to have the stall door open, and they watch me go to the bathroom. When I go to bed at night, they would stay up an hour after lights out to make sure I wasn't doing anything. They would just sit on the floor and watch me sleep.
Oh my goodness, that's creepy. And these big sisters or big brothers, they're residents themselves, so they've been given sort of like this extra responsibility.
It was a privilege for them to sit and watch me sleep. They were in a position of strength. So it's all dog eat dog. If you want to get ahead, you need to nobody's your friend. Everyone is against each other. Mm-hmm, they're there to basically, I guess, narc on each other. Yeah. That's how we grow. That's how you're going to grow, is if you see somebody do something they're not supposed to be doing within the system, you report them. And that is growth.
And that's how it is positioned to residents. Yeah. This growth is what will happen if you incorporate this self-policing into your everyday lives. And we see this time and time again in these high demand groups and these high controlling groups, where if you're focused on each other and worried about one another, you're so concerned about watching your every move and watching everybody else's that you're not questioning what the adults in charge are doing. Isn't
it genius though? I mean,
absolutely.
Genius. You just get the people there to police each other, so you don't have to really do it, and you make everyone against each other and scared of each other. And then you got a working system, don't you?
Yep. And instead of all of the residents saying, why on earth are our phone calls being monitored home? Why on earth can't we write letters to our parents without you reading them? Why on earth do I have to be watched for an hour once I've gone to bed? Instead of you questioning all of those things, you're so concerned with each other and your own behavior that you don't have the capacity to have those thoughts about those people who are in charge and are supposed to be taking care of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned before that you had encounter groups, which are the same as the game in Synanon, and I'm guessing the same as RAPS in CEDU, in the CEDU therapeutic boarding schools that we've spoken about.
It's attack therapy.
And how often were you expected to go to these groups? How many of you were there?
Well, there's a process to it. Okay. So say I was sitting in the dining room and so-and-so resident accidentally stepped on my foot. Complete accident. I am supposed to feel anger towards this person. So I take a little tiny piece of paper and write to the person's name, from me, the date, and then I write an A with a circle around it and drop it in what we had. It was a box. It was called a slip box. So all throughout the week, you're dropping these slips for people, and there's these feelings: hurt, anger, concern. I don't know what the other ones were. It was usually anger. That was, the main feeling. You're supposed to feel very angry. So I don't know if it was the staff would take all of these slips, and that's how they made their groups. And, I dropped 10 slips on such and such a person, and the feeling was anger. So I got to be in an encounter group with them. And that was on Monday and Friday. And I got to get my feelings off for them.
And do you feel like a lot of the time these emotions that you're expressing were misdirected? They were, you ended up kind of expressing yourself and the way that you felt towards the wrong person?
it was just a process. It was a formality. I wasn't really angry at this person. I really didn't care. But you were expected to get your feelings off. If you went into this group and didn't have any feelings, then you were in trouble. So yeah, like I didn't care that, such and such a person stepped on my foot. I'm not that type of person. Like, but you were directed to be made to feel that you should be angry about this. So you should drop a flip on this person and you should get your feelings off. And when you get your feelings off, it was kind of like, it was like acting almost. I wasn't connected to the feeling.
Right.
Doing my part, doing what I was supposed to do.
So when we speak to people on the show that have these religious experiences where they are expected to speak in tongues or to be drunk on the Holy Spirit, and they have so much pressure on them to have these religious experiences that they almost feel it's easier to fake them so that nobody looks at them anymore and they move on to the next person. So do you feel like it's quite similar in the way that if everybody's looking at you to be angry at somebody or to tell someone how you really think or feel, then as soon as you do that, even if you don't feel like it's genuine or legitimate, then they move on to the next person and leave you alone?
Yeah, you're just going through the motions. You don't want to put the spotlight on yourself, because once you put the spotlight on yourself, then they start saying, oh, well, you've got guilt. You need to cop to your guilt because you're holding something back. So you're just going through the everyday motions of what they tell you to do. So you're not getting, you're not getting the spotlight put on you.
Right.
You want to conform so much. You just, conforming. And I've always been a nonconformist. So, down to heart. So this was hard for me, but, I also didn't like having to cop to my guilt all the time. So, I did what I was supposed to. And, looking back on it, I do feel bad for the people that, I never intentionally meant to hurt anybody, but I'm sure I did. But, we all were doing it to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But for myself, I never wanted to hurt anybody.
No.
And
when you say that people are expected to, quote, get their feelings off, I'm guessing this is terminology that's specific to the Élan School.
Yep, it was, you talk about speaking in tongues, it was probably very similar to that. There was a certain rhythmic pattern to getting your feelings off. It was screaming, screaming. And it usually started off with looking dead at the person, fuck you. And then you would go, it was almost like incoherent, your feelings. You were just kind of like almost rambling, and then you would just stop.
It sounds exhausting. I know, just in my old job, when I would take groups of 50, 60 children out and we'd go to the zoo, and I'd be like, come back here and don't run off, and where are you going? And just the whole day of like trying to take care of such a big group of children. All of us as staff at the end of it would be absolutely exhausted. And I feel as if at the end of one of these encounter groups, you must just feel absolutely drained.
I don't know if I was, because I was doing so much that, and like I said, I was dissociating. So, it's almost like you lose all, because you're not in the outside world anymore. You're in this little microcosm functioning, community, and you do what you're supposed to. So I don't know if I was taught, like I didn't, those things where you're like, oh, I feel really tired. I wasn't thinking about that.
Right.
Oh, I'm really hungry. I'm not thinking about that. I'm just surviving. You know, I'm doing what it takes to survive without getting in trouble. And I'm 16 years old, but I have to make it through the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not in touch with those instincts anymore. I'm sure most people weren't either.
And I wonder as well how well it becomes, every time we do one of these interviews, it just becomes clearer and clearer how almost incestuous the troubled teen industry is, because the game, which is called renamed Encounter Groups for Elan, and then wraps in Sea-Doo, and then you're being told to get your feelings off, and then in Sea-Doo they've just renamed that doing your work, so you have to do your work, otherwise the session doesn't end. Their rap session won't end unless you're doing your work, and if you're not, then there are consequences for that, which I'm guessing you had as well. So it's almost like it's almost crystal clear that the skeleton for these programs is being adopted by each boarding school, and everybody's just putting their own stamp on it by renaming it different things. And do you remember any types of consequences or punishments that there would be for not conforming to the rules, or for not getting your feelings off?
So when you're doing something all the time, you're just going through the motions. You're an autopilot. You know, I don't remember specific encounter groups. I don't remember who I got my feelings off for. I don't remember who got feelings off for me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember any of that because it was just going through the motions. You know, it was just a formality. It was like, you know, you getting up and brushing your teeth and then having your coffee. Do you remember doing that, 6 weeks ago? You know, you don't remember it.
Yeah.
I do have things that stick out in my head. And one, and I really want to talk about this. When I got there around the same time, a boy, 12 years old. I have a son that's turning 12 at the end of October, and I look at him. And it's shocking to me. But a boy who was 12 years old, he arrived, I think it was the same time as me. It must have been a day before or after. His voice hasn't changed. He hasn't gone through puberty. He's just a little boy, okay? He had recently just lost his mother. His mother had died of cancer.
Goodness.
He's got a sister who has Down syndrome, and then he's got a younger sister too. And, you know, he didn't deal with his mother's death very well, obviously, you know, so I don't remember every specific detail of it, but he was in a lot of pain, obviously, you know, losing your mother at age 12. And I guess towards the end of her life, the way he dealt with it was, you know, kind of rejecting her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kids deal with things very differently. You know, they don't have the tools.
No.
When it comes to stuff like that, you shouldn't have to have the tools at 12 years old to.
No, absolutely not.
To deal with your mother dying. So he gets sent to Elan. Okay, I'm sure, you know, his dad got the same, you know, spiel that my dad got, you know, how great this is going to be, but he's 12 years old and he is in so much pain, but she's not, you know, crying. And the way he's dealing with pain is by misbehaving, by being naughty and doing little boy naughty things, you know, doing gross things, you know, saying gross things, trying to get a rise out of people. This is how he's dealing with his pain of losing his mother. So he ends up in the corner let's talk about the corner. The corner is, where you go when you are, you go to corner for anything, really. But you usually end up at the corner when you're not doing what you're supposed to. You know, if they tell you to sit down and you don't sit down, you know, or you won't sit down, you go to the corner. So he was in the corner when he arrived because he was reactive. And so basically the corner is exactly what it sounds like. You sit in a chair facing a corner and somebody of higher strength sits with you to watch you. And that's what you do all day long. You just stare in a chair, sit in a chair, staring at a corner. You sleep in a corner. You wake up, you're in a corner. If you decide to get up, if you decide that you're gonna, you know, they'll restrain you. And a lot of times it's students restraining the corner people with zip ties. That's just normal. You know, children aren't supposed to be restraining other students.
No.
But we didn't know that, you know, we just did what we were told. So this boy, 12 years old, in the corner, he just isn't getting with the program. He's 12. So they decide, let's try a new tactic. Let's put him in the ring. The ring is a boxing ring. You're literally put on boxing gloves, and it's the, you know, person that's misbehaving, and then it's somebody who's of strength, another student of strength who is fighting you. So he's put in the ring a lot, and he's 12 years old, and they usually put, you know, we don't have a lot of 12-year-olds in the house, so he's usually put in there with somebody that's like 15, 16, probably has like, goodness, you know, 50 to 60 pounds on him. He's, you know, and they have Marty. Marty was a high position in the Elan program. He was pretty much below Joe Ritchie. He would come down with his stopwatch and he'd be timing it. Oh, this is entertainment for him, you know, having fun watching two kids beat the shit out of each other. So this boy, I just remember him. It breaks, like, I hate thinking about this because it breaks my heart. It breaks my fucking heart thinking about it. One time he was in there and he's just laying on the ground, covering himself. He's got his boxing gloves on. He's covering his face. And, you know, he's in so much pain. He's in so much pain losing his mother, covering his face. So they had two guys from the house, two students, come and hold him up so the other person can pummel him in the face. And I'm watching this, and it is absolutely traumatizing to see this. But this was life. This was my life, seeing stuff like this, you know. But the 12-year-old, it really sticks out in my head because he was so young. He was so young. And he didn't know who he was. I mean, none of us really knew who we were, but he was just a kid.
Well, you were all children, but 12 years old. I mean, that's I can't get my head around these stories and these experiences and how they are even allowed to happen and continue to happen. 12 years old. And
12 years old.
The students are being actively encouraged to beat him up whilst the staff and responsible adults sit there and watch it like they've paid for box office or they've paid for ringside tickets. How is this? It's angering, isn't it? It really is hard to comprehend that you're in a place where you're supposed to be receiving legitimate therapy and help for
this boy probably just needed a hug. He probably just needed a hug and a shoulder to cry and tell him it was going to be okay. But no, he gets the shit beat out of him because he isn't conforming. And sorry, I didn't mean to raise my voice. I'm just angry.
Would you be? allowed to console somebody through things like hugging?
No.
Is that something? Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think if you're females, you can hug somebody, to a certain degree, but females and males weren't allowed to touch each other. Obviously, there was we had 3 rules. God, I can't remember the name of it. But they were like the 3 big rules, and it was no drugs, no contact between males and females, and no physical violence. And those were the 3 big rules. If you broke them, it was, you were shit out of luck.
So,
and running away too was bad too.
No physical, you're not allowed to physically attack someone unless you've been put in the ring where staff will then force you to physically attack somebody.
Yep.
That is just...
And I think the ring was it was originally designed to, for somebody that, was physically violent, like say if a corner person went and smacked their support person or was physically violent, but it got warped like everything there. So, people got rings for things a lot, like even if they said, I'm going to kick you, but they didn't, that would get you a ring.
And when when males and females are not allowed to interact with each other, how was the LGBTQIA plus community within the school? Did the staff just not realize that was a potential, that there could be interactions between same-sex couples?
I don't know. I never really thought about that. I'm sure it did occur, but I was never aware of anything like that occurring. I do know people that, were there that have come out, and have come out, but, I don't know, like it wasn't, no. I mean, back in the 90s, being part of the LGBTQ, I don't know, a community, was still kind of frowned upon. So they didn't really talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned that running away was something that was frowned upon as well within the school. Mm-hmm. Do you ever remember maybe yourself or anyone else running away during your time?
Oh yeah. Yep. Somebody actually, I had been there about 3 months. I'd done really well. I was really, conformed awesomely. I was, everyone, thought I was doing great. And, but I was ADHD, so I was spacey, and they don't use medication there. They, there's no form, they use medication for medical problems. If you had like, I don't know, diabetes or whatever, obviously they treat that, but they wouldn't give you, medication if, for depression, or for me, Ritalin. So very spacey. And we were outside one time, and I was on a zone, and this is our outdoor time. And zones are basically, people of strength would create a perimeter around a space, and everyone inside it couldn't pass your invisible zone line. So it was a circle of people of strength watching. And somebody, I'm spacing out while I'm on the zone, and a cat comes by, and I'm petting the cat, and I'm, looking at the sky, and 2 boys split off my zone. And I got in trouble for that. They got caught. you know, you never go far. We're out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and then they send students after you to track you. So when you run away, you usually always get brought back.
Unfortunately, as well, quite tragically, in a lot of these programs, there are a number of graduates who will go on to take their own lives. And I don't know if that's something that you have experienced with anyone in your peer group.
I can count on my fingers and toes how many people I knew that have, you know, taken their own lives or have overdosed.
Were they people who were directly affected by the school program itself?
I would say yes, definitely. There was one staff member there who was actually a former resident. I'll refer to him as the Crow. And he always had this one saying, general meetings was something that you got, you'd be put up in front of the house, and the staff member would say, this person's done such and such a thing. You'd be up in front of the house, everyone would be seated, and there would be a broomstick right in front of you. And the staff member would say, this person's done such and such a thing. If you have your feelings, get them off. And everyone would just run up there and start screaming in your face, 3 people at a time. There'd be spit flying. You know, it was, I wonder if people could see this, what they would, like people that weren't used to it, what they would think, like what they would be thinking. The staff member that was, you know, a former resident, when women had these general meetings, he always, and you know, these girls, they could have been virgins, never sexually active. They could have been 14, 13. He would always say to them, after they just gotten, you know, everyone gotten their feelings off, this is what he would say to these women, these girls, the only value you're ever going to feel in your life is by lying on your back and spreading your legs for a man. And he said this so many times. How can you live with something like that being said to you?
That is absolutely vile.
He never said it to me, but it still sticks with me. I still think about it. And it's still, you know, when things are said like that, it almost makes you feel shame about your sexuality, you know?
It's almost like going back to that experience where you were told to remove all of your clothing and you were so concerned about how you saw yourself in that moment that you didn't think about why you were being asked to do what you were doing. And I think this is similar in the sense that this disgusting man,
he was a 40-something-year-old man.
And these are the things that
13,
now
14-year-old girls.
Absolutely. So these are the things now from an outsider's perspective, or somebody that's no longer involved in the program can take a step back and say, why is a 40-something-year-old man saying these things to young girls? Why?
Because he could.
And I wonder if that's the only place where perhaps he felt that he could be successful or have power over other people, and whether he enjoyed feeling like he
was the worst of the worst.
Like when you get the heaves because something makes you feel uncomfortable, he's the kind of person. He probably enjoyed the power.
He was a complete narcissist. He you know, when he walked into the room, everyone just kind of got quiet and he would pick on the weak. He would pick on, because you know, some kids winded up there that had cognitive disabilities, and he would find these ones that were, you know, had cognitive disabilities. They could have been on the spectrum or whatever, and he would pick on them, and because he knew it was like baiting them. He knew he could get them wound up, and then as soon as they started to react, get up in the house, general meeting, get your feelings off. He baited them.
He sounds like a very cowardly, weak, small man?
Well, to us, he was a monster. He was the monster under your bed that was waiting to get, his claws on you.
And you mentioned that he was a resident before he became a staff member.
Yeah.
Was that quite a normal, common thing?
Yeah, I don't, because the program opened a long time ago, and I think it was more common earlier on, but some just stayed. Like, some stayed for decades. The woman who ran my house, she was a former resident, and then the Crow was, I think he was there in, could have been the 70s or 80s. So, yeah, I think it is. If they get kind of like Joe Ritchie, where they kind of, feel like a leadership and control, and it's feeding their ego to a sense, continue on.
And
they're usually narcissistic people, though.
It does seem to kind of, it definitely seems to kind of fit that commonality and that pattern. And considering that these were advertised to parents and doctors and therapists and whatnot as therapeutic boarding schools, that would come with a certain connotation that the staff members themselves, or at least some part of the boarding school, there would be people with accreditations and qualifications. So do you know if any of the staff were trained in that capacity, or what type of general education the staff held?
I think high school. The staff members that were there every day, they were just staff. You could, the ones that were nice, the ones that were, you could tell that were empathetic, they didn't last long. And there's a reason for that, because they probably knew that this was wrong, and they didn't feel comfortable doing it. So the nice ones never lasted. They would, last a month or two, and then they, were gone. I don't know if they got fired or if they, decided to leave on their own. But no, I just figure, they probably advertised these jobs in the paper and anybody could apply. And yeah, it was a huge turnover. There were always the core staff members that stayed, but in terms of like, the general, because there was directors and then assistant directors and then staff, but the turnover rate for staff was huge.
And the fact that you said that most staff probably had only a high school education, when you spend so much of your academic teenage years wrapped up in this therapeutic boarding school, what kind of qualifications or educational attainment are you graduating with?
So we went to school, but school was a joke. It was done at night. They actually had real teachers come in. Some of them were retired, public school teachers. And school, I want to say it was from, it was at night. I can't remember. I think it was 4 hours of school, and because we went to bed at 12 o'clock every night. So I think it was late. It was like maybe like 6 to 11 or 7 to something like that, where they were staying. These teachers were up late. This doesn't sound ridiculous, going to school that late. But the classes were, I remember being in class with like 12-year-olds, and like, that was a sham. And you only had to do homework once a week. And it was just, I didn't learn much. Like, I remember taking chemistry, and we didn't use, we didn't do chemistry. Like, we learned from a book, and that was it. And there weren't really any tests or anything like that. It was just, like, the school itself, it was just a sham. But I feel very lucky, because you can graduate with a law school, high school diploma. And I was given the option of getting a diploma from my high school as like kind of like a transfer thing, or collaboration. I don't know what you'd call it. So I was asked, do you want to get your high school diploma from Elan, or do you want to get it from your high school? And I said, I want it from my high school. And I don't know, I feel like very smart for doing that, like even being so young. So I do have a high school diploma from my town high school.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Now, if the school knew how little schooling I actually got, they probably would have not been okay with it. But something, one of the few things that did work out really well for me when leaving.
And I feel as though a few people we've spoken to on the show have actually, had to, in their 20s and sometimes 30s and onwards, have had to go back into education to get their GED, just to be able to tell employees that they actually do have that, or if they want to access further education, have to go back to complete that high school education.
I'm so happy I didn't do that. That I was able to get my high school diploma, because it would have been really hard. Actually, they once you leave or graduate, they want you to go straight off to college, and I was able to do that. So.
And you said previously that you're supposed to be able to contact your family after 3 months of being in the Élan School, but that's not something that happened for you. So what is the story behind that?
No, that's okay. When you get there, they want you to write a guilt letter to your family. And basically in this letter is like, mine was like probably 15 pages. They want you to write everything that you did wrong before you got there. That's the first thing they want you to do. And once you send the guilt letter, your parents can either say, yes, we approve this, or no, you left stuff out, do some more guilt. I think they encourage the parents to reject the letter and ask for more, because you can't talk to your parents until your guilt letter is approved by them, until your parents accept it. And my parents, even though the letter was 15 pages long, they asked for more information about certain things. And I don't remember what that exact information was. But after they finally approve your guilt letter, you can have a phone conference with them. So I probably didn't talk to them for about a month. I didn't get to see them. Let's see, I got there at the end of April. I didn't get to see them until October. So.
And how long are the programs supposed to last for? Do people have a certain amount of time they're expected to stay, like a minimum or a maximum? And a lot of the time,
you are told that when you get there, they say the average stay is 24 months. That was bullshit. I only knew one person that graduated within 24 months, and he was like perfect. He had been in programs before, so he knew the drill. He just got down to work and climbed right through the ranks, and he was like a robot. Most people, I was there for 30 months, 2.5 years. I actually, when you turn 18, you're a legal adult. I turned 18 there. I wanted to leave. I wanted to sign out. And that's something that I expressed that I wanted to do. And I didn't even have a plan. I just wanted to get out of there. Like, I was hoping to go back to my town high school and finish off. So when I told my parents that I wanted to sign out, I got a fax. And my dad, he was not very good with correspondence. So when he wrote to me, it was usually like down to business. And he said, we want you to stay. We want you to finish what you start, but you always have a home. So that meant if I signed out to me that I could come home. And a couple of days later, I get another fax from him. And he said, in this fax, totally changed his tune. If you sign out and you step one foot on our property, we will call the police on you. So the staff must have gotten to him and told them all these horrible things about what I would do if I left. And encouraged him to take a strong stance with me and tell me that, I didn't have a home if I signed out. So I didn't sign out. I stayed. my parents' approval was still very important to me while I was there.
And unfortunately, which is another commonality that we've seen across these interviews and coverage that we've done on this show, the parents are told that if they pull their children from these programs before that they've completed the program and finished the work, that they might end up dying, they might end up dead, because the program is the only thing that can save their lives at this time. And as a parent, of course, you want to do anything you can do to save your child, to protect your child. And just the other day, that the lady I spoke to, who I mentioned previously, she sent me a picture of the handbook that is sent home to parents that says on the front page, do not listen to anything your children tell you whilst they attend this program, because they are manipulating you. And I couldn't believe that it was in writing on a piece of paper. They basically, it surprised me that they weren't insinuating it, that they actually wrote it in words and sent it home. You know, your children are only manipulating you if they tell you that they are being abused, or that they need to come home because they're being hurt and they're not being taken care of, and they're being forced to do all of these things against their will. So how devastating that must be for your father now, to look back and realize that he was manipulated, not by the children, like these schools tried to tell them, but by the school itself.
I don't talk about it with my dad about Elan very often. I mean, it was 22 years ago. I'm sure we talked about it a lot after I left. I talk more, you know, if it comes up, I talk more about it with my mom. But, you know, he sees what he sees, and he sees that I am married. I've been married for 18 years. I've got 3 children. I'm alive. I don't, you know, I'm a productive member of society. So in his mind, you know, in his mind, whatever, you know, happened, I guess worked. I don't blame my parents for sending me there, because, you know, I did probably for a while, but now that I'm a parent, I can see that they were manipulated, and you know, I don't blame them. I'd do anything to keep my kids safe.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why it's such a minefield for parents who are trying to find the correct help and the correct interventions for children who are struggling with the number of problems that people attending these programs may be experiencing. You mentioned that the graduation ceremonies at the Élan School are quite extravagant. So can you just talk us through, when you finally do graduate from the school, what that experience was like for you?
It was surreal, I guess, because you're there for so long and you just never think that you're going to leave. And I want to mention almost everybody that's either graduated or left Elan, we all have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the reason I can say that is because we all have the same nightmare, where we're back at Elan and we're stuck there and we can't leave. How do we all have the same nightmare? We all have the same nightmare. But, you know, getting to the graduation, I almost felt like it wasn't going to happen. Like, what's going to happen where I'm never going to be able to leave. And it finally happened where I was going to graduate. And this was October 27, 1999. And what they do is they have you get to ask staff members to speak that you feel close to. So I had a bunch of staff members speak, and they, you know, it's always like, oh, when you came in here, you were such a mess, and now look at you, you've blossomed, you're wonderful. look how far you've come, and everyone's crying. And I remember crying, like I was just bawling, like, it's just, and, you're sitting, they do the couches. So you're sitting in a couch and your parents are next to you. And then you have also people that you were close to in the program. You can come sit on your couch. That's like an honor to have someone ask you to sit on your couch.
They're usually done in the morning, and they'll clear the morning activities for your graduation. And my graduation was different because most parents don't get up and speak, but my parents did get up and speak to everybody. And my dad recorded it too. I've actually never seen the video that he recorded of my graduation. I probably wouldn't want to watch it though. But yeah, even my little brother, who was like, it must have been like 10 or 11 at the time, he even got up there and spoke in front of all those people, all the residents that were still there, the students, and people like the other students. They were crying and they were just so touched. And it was just, it was a very special graduation.
You end up staying in the program until after your 18th birthday. And then you have your graduation ceremony, which you said felt like a special day for you because you finally realized that your time there had been prolonged, but you were actually going to leave. Your family came down, your parents spoke, your younger brother spoke. You were still, as you mentioned, concerned about your parents' opinion of you at that time as well. So it must have been quite an overwhelming experience to have them there and speak about you. And how long is it? Do you leave on the day of the graduation?
Yep. I left right after it. Got in the car. I remember we stopped off at of all places, McDonald's, and I was a vegetarian, so I ended up getting like a grilled cheese. We had that, and then we went home. And you're told when you graduate, it's almost like you're cured. Like that's the goal, is to graduate and you're cured of everything. And everything's going to be like this huge idealistic, like utopia, and everything's going to be perfect. And it's like getting kicked off of a ship into the water. That's what it felt like. Because you're living in your own reality, their reality, and then you're just dropped off back in the world. It's like aliens adopted you, indoctrinated you into their alien cult, and then you're dropped back off, on Earth from the spaceship, like expected to like function. And you have this idea that like everything is going to be fine. And it really kind of wasn't.
That's such a great way to look at it as well, because you've been in this insular community away from typical everyday life, typical everyday interactions. You can't just walk to the corner shop and buy yourself milk and bread, and you can't just go home after normal public school experiences and just eat dinner with your parents and your younger brother. You can't just watch commercial television and be up to date with artists' singles and movies that are on at the theater. You'd kind of have like a 2-year gap of not having these experiences, and then all of a sudden you graduate, you go home, and then it's like, I don't know who any of these pop stars are. I don't know who any of these celebrity influencers are. I don't know the 19th film in the Marvel franchise that's come out since I've been like, it must be so overwhelming to just be dropped back off into this life that you haven't been a part of for so long and just be expected to carry on where you left off.
And it's so funny because there's been 2.5 years that have gone by, and my family, my parents and me, and the dynamic has picked up where it's left off. They don't trust me because of everything, that was drilled into their head about me. So I had to deal with that. They almost didn't know how to parent me. I was still 16 in their eyes, and I was still, gonna get up to no good. And that was really hard. And I had no friends. Like, all the people that I knew had moved on, and, I just kind of disappeared. So I had no real support system. And I have to get a job. My parents want me to get a job, because I left at the end of I left Elan at the end of October, and I wasn't starting school till January. So I've got this 3 months period. So I ended up getting a job at a music store, and that worked out pretty good. But it was still, it was just really weird. Like, I just didn't know how to be. Like, I didn't know myself, like who I was. Yeah.
And it's upsetting as well when you think about your parents not trusting you and being kind of wary of you when you've just had this hellish 2-year experience that you probably wouldn't even know how to tell them or where to start, or perhaps even figure it's pointless to have the discussion because they might not believe you because of the things that they've been told. So I imagine trying to juggle that on top of everything else must have been quite difficult as well.
Yeah. And, I just graduated, and it was like this, it almost felt like a badge of honor, so I was still in contact with the school, to let them know that I was doing what I was supposed to. I became very much so a people pleaser. And I don't know if that's something that I've always had in me, or if I don't know if that's something that, Elan has made me become a people pleaser, where I wanted everyone to know that I was doing great and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm a good girl, so I would still call the director that I was close with at the school and, talk to her, tell her what was going on. I felt like I still needed to report back and tell her that I was being good, I was doing what I was supposed to. It's still, I needed that reassurance from her.
And after you left and tried to kind of work your way through this strange period in your life, what has your life been like since? Because you mentioned before, now you're married, you have, you're a mother, so you've kind of almost flipped everything around between then and now.
It wasn't easy though. When I left there, I started, I went to work for 3 months, and that was fine. I did what I needed to do. And then I went off to college, and I actually did well in college, surprisingly. I think it was the college that I went to. It was geared towards, it had a program for students that had special needs. I wasn't part of the program, but it was more catered towards, when I say special needs, I don't mean like, I don't know how to describe it. People that had like dyslexia and like ADHD, and, they had special learning support. Curry College is what the college is. Curry College in Milton, Mass. It's a very good school. I actually did well there, surprisingly enough, because I basically had 2.5 years where I had no real education. But I had all this freedom. I was living on campus. I was drinking. I was smoking. I was smoking cigarettes and smoking weed. Not all the time, but occasionally. I was engaging in being promiscuous, I guess. I was just, after being, I went from one extreme where I was so regimented to the other extreme where I was just, and it wasn't really bad. Like I wasn't like drinking, where I needed to drink. Like I wasn't an alcoholic or anything like that. It was recreation. I was just doing what everyone else was doing.
Yeah, almost sort of like rite of passage, almost experiences.
Yeah,
that typical teenagers have that you may have missed out on.
Yeah. But it was having these experiences made me feel guilty. I felt guilty about it. Where other people probably didn't feel guilty about it. But I did really well that first year in school. My grades were really good. I was going to class. I was doing what I needed to do. I had friends. And then I met somebody. I had a boyfriend who was out of state. And I ended up leaving school and moving away with him because the dynamics with my parents was so stressful. We would get into a lot of fights, especially me and my mom. So I just wanted to get away from my parents at the time because they were expecting me to be a certain way. And I felt like I could just do no right by their eyes. So I left school after a year and moved in with this boyfriend in Virginia, and things just got really bad. I was doing more cutting. I was back to my old games. Here I was thinking I was cured. Like, I was never going to do the stuff I did before because I was cured. But, I ended up attempting suicide again and ended up back. I think I did 3 more stints in the psych ward. And by my 21st birthday, I ended up coming back home. I had broken up with this boyfriend, coming back home, enrolling in a school different from Curry College. And I made a really good friend through the school. And things started to straighten out. I was 21 and things started to straighten out. And that summer of 21, I ended up being a camp counselor in, of all places, Maine. At a camp. It was a 8 weeks summer camp for girls, and I was a camp counselor, and that's where I met my husband. And after I met my husband, everything straightened out. And he's, because it's funny, I was at a point where I probably would, like, you have the scenario in your head of like, there's, you would have gotten on back of any man's motorbike and just to get away, to steal away, just to get away from the situation. And I was at that point. Anybody that would have taken me, I would have gone with. And by the grace of God or the universe, the person's motorbike that I got in back of ended up being the best person I could have ever been with. Like, my husband is like my rock.
It's funny because I'm currently I'm currently doing some deep dive episodes on Charles Manson and the Manson family, and a lot of the women that ended up following Charles Manson were in those positions that you yourself have just, they needed to get away. and they were leaving their families behind, and they packed a bag, and they just kind of happened to stumble upon Charles Manson, who knew exactly.
That could have been me.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank goodness for your husband.
I just wanted to be loved and accepted and supported, and be able to be myself, you know, and be accepted that way. And at the time I wasn't getting it from my family. No. So I wanted to feel unconditionally loved. And probably he gave me that.
You were probably still looking for that place that you asked your parents for all those years before, when you said you needed to feel safe.
Yep.
And there he was. And did you find yourself able to talk about your experiences with him, and he could listen and understand?
Casey, it's so incredible. I told him everything. Like, you know, when we started our relationship, it was like a forbidden love because we were at camp and, you know, we were both camp counselors. But I'm a very open person, and I just laid it all on him. I said, this is what I've been through. This is what I'm going through. This is what I've done. And he was fine with it. And he's very caring, and he wanted to be there for me. He wanted to care for me. That's he accepted fantastic. Me the way I was, and he loved me. And I'd been looking for that all my life, to feel loved unconditionally. And he's done that. He's done that for me. You know, if I hadn't met him, I don't know what could have happened. I just feel very fortunate. And I feel very, very grateful for him.
And we've been making a point in these episodes to when these heroes come through in these stories, to take a minute to just say a quick thank you and have a little moment of appreciation, to just just say, you know, thank you for being allies, for being supportive, for being understanding, for listening, allowing those safe spaces. And just as cult expert Yanya Lalich said when she came on the show, keeping those lines of communication open is sometimes the biggest, most powerful tool in helping somebody overcome these coercive, controlling environments, these years or months of manipulation. And that's, you know, this person came along and completely empowered your life, changed your life in the most positive way, maybe even saved your life. So just a massive thank you to your significant other for being that person for you.
He is the most wonderful person I've ever met. And I don't know. I must have somebody out there looking out for me, because I can't even say enough. Like, you know, I mean, how fucked up I was, and he's always there for me. He's never turned his back on me. And you can't find people like that. You can't find people like that.
It does feel very rare these days, to have those kinds of friendships, relationships, and connections with people, especially with the level of disenchantment that there is in everyday society now. So you've graduated. You've still had this contention between yourself and your family. You've gone into a turbulent relationship, which you may have fallen into perhaps because it felt so normal after the 2 years that you'd had in the Élan School. And then you eventually find this person who changes your life for the better and helps you to pave the way for this new life where you have a family and you are speaking to other survivors about their experiences, and you're all working towards dealing with the trauma and the abuse and overcoming these things. Are you attending any type of therapy for that at all?
I've done heaps of therapy since I left, and I feel like it's not helped me. It's hard to explain. I feel like maybe it just wasn't the right type of therapy. I probably need like trauma therapy, and but yeah, no, I've done lots and lots of therapy. I'm not currently in therapy now. I'm actually in the process of training to become a counselor myself. To help, I want to help people. It's funny that, that I'm going down this path, to wanting
I
to
don't
help
think
people.
it's funny at all. I think you probably on some subconscious level realize that there are people out there who are posing as therapy, like the staff that at the Élan School who weren't qualified or equipped to be helping young adults deal with trauma and self-harming and drug addiction and antisocial behavior, or any of the number of reasons that young adults were being sent to these programs. And perhaps then you've said to yourself, I feel like I could do this better, and I could positively impact people's lives.
There is definitely a need for it here. There's a lot of mental health issues here in New Zealand, and there's not a lot of counselors, especially in the area that I'm in. So I think that's what's kind of driving it, to want to get out there and help.
That sounds fantastic and so encouraging as well for anybody listening who may have had similar experiences where they've been so low and confused, and they've been in turbulent family environments, and they've been through over 2 years of institutionalized abuse, to then hear your story of finding somebody that you can love wholeheartedly and trust, start a family with that person, and then go on to actually find a career choice that will work for you, that you're genuinely interested in and that you are pursuing. And that's such an active role to have in the community, and how you're able to have the motivation to do those things. It's got to be encouraging for people who maybe feel as though there is no place for them in society because they feel so disconnected from everything because of their experiences. So that's a really positive message for potentially for some people listening today. And I think it's very important to highlight those things and point those things out. So there were a few things that you sent over that I think are important resources to mention as well. So we connected from the r/troubled teen subreddit, which I think is a great resource for people who may wish to connect with maybe others that attended similar programs to them, or to learn more about other programs outside of the Élan School that are still in operation, unfortunately, today. Or to even just learn about what's being done in terms of legal reform in the States to shut some of these schools down, or to change policies to make sure that there is some type of oversight to how these places are being run. Can
I speak to that, Casey?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so Élan School was, I graduated in 1999, and it was still in operation until 2011. Now, it got shut down. Now, it wasn't shut down. They closed. They had to close the school down. You know why they closed the school down?
Oh,
Because
probably not paying taxes or something silly.
No, they were still full force, trying to carry on with the program. Former residents went on a campaign using Reddit to shut the school down.
Wow.
We went full force into speaking our truth about what went on there, because you would Google Elan, and they had all these sites where schools like, oh, great schools and blah blah blah, like all bullshit sites that and a person that I was actually in school with, he was just to remain anonymous, but if you watch the last Stop documentary, he speaks to it. He started a thread on Reddit, and it went viral, and from there it just exploded, and they had to shut the school down.
That is absolutely incredible.
Speaking their truth about what happened to them.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. Well, how empowering is that after everything that happened? That's got to feel great.
No, it felt great, because that was the goal. It was that nobody would have to go through what we went through. At Elan, I know there's still schools in existence, but I think it's important, if you've gone through a similar experience, don't be afraid to speak your truth, and bring it to light. Don't feel shame, don't feel guilt. It's wrong. The school, Elan, was abusive. We were abused on a daily, regular basis.
Yeah. And this is just a perfect example. If people are worried about coming forward because they feel like their stories won't navigate change, look what happened when you all came forward and spoke about what happened to you. The school shut down. It had to shut down. This particular school can't inflict that abuse on residents any longer, and hopefully the more people that come forward and speak about their personal experiences in these quote therapeutic boarding schools, the more chance there is for this to happen, this revolution to happen, and this abuse within these institutions to finally stop. So that's fantastic. And the advice there on not for people not to feel shame or guilt or to blame themselves, I think is so important as well, and very prevalent to highlight. And you mentioned briefly the Last Stop documentary, which is something that I was going to go on to next. So we've got the r/troubled teen subreddit. There's the breakingcodesilence.org website that people can visit to read testimonies, to submit their own testimonies, to look at what is being done about legal reform on the website there as well. And there's also the option to donate to the cause as well, which is extremely important. Then there is the Last Stop documentary for anybody who would like to learn more, which is available on YouTube. And you've sent me the link to that, Rachel, and I did watch.
Helped.
Oh, you did?
I helped the I wasn't interviewed, because at the time the documentary filmmaker, who was a former resident, he was there, I believe, 10 years, maybe less than 10 years after me. He lived in the Northeast, and I was living in Georgia, so their interview wasn't possible, but I did contribute. I sent him a bunch of pictures and, anything I had left over, forms, and I sent to him, and he used in his documentary. I just wanted to help him because I wanted to, it's so important for me to get the word out there, for the survivors.
And it's a fantastic resource as well. The documentary starts by showing snippets of residents who talk about having these basically like extreme behaviors, extreme addictions, being in trouble with the police. And basically the documentary opens itself by positioning these residents as really having no other choice than to have this intervention. This extreme intervention that comes in the form of the Élan School is not helpful whatsoever. And then it even goes on to show people who were sent there because their parents had the money to send them there for chatting with the opposite sex and maybe not paying as much attention in class as their parents would have liked them to. So it really does kind of show you all the different aspects of
the screening process. When it first opened, it was for drug addicts, and it turned into a place where they would take anybody. These kids, they could have been, molested. They could have gone because they smoked a cigarette or they sassed. There was one girl who was there. I think she sassed off to her bus driver. And that's why she got sent there.
It's very
just anybody, if you've got
the whole spectrum.
If you're rich, we'll take you.
And I think the Last Stop documentary highlights all of those differences and the entire spectrum, and it's very, very cleverly done, and a great resource for people that want to learn more about the school itself, about how it was started, Joe Ritchie's involvement in signing on a Daytop and starting up the Elan School. So it really is fantastic. And a great oversight to the school overall. And then the last thing really for anyone who would like to learn more is the Joe versus Elan School comic series, which is very popular amongst research into the troubled teen industry. It's one of the things that you'll come across more often when people are like, oh, how can I learn more? There's always, someone will always say, oh, go check out this comic because you won't be able to stop reading it. And it's really insightful, really compelling reading. So I'll put a link to the subreddit, the Joe versus Elan School comic and the Last Stop documentary on YouTube within the episode description as well for anybody who wants to go and check out those resources to learn more. And unless you think there's anything we've missed that you would like to mention, Rachel, I think we've covered everything today.
I just want to acknowledge the residents that I was in school with, and people before me and people after me who have passed away. It's so hard. And I don't know if they never went to Elan, if it still would have been, if they still would have, taken their own lives or had an overdose. But I just want to acknowledge them, the survivors.
I think that's also an important message as well, to make sure that those people are still talked about, still remembered, not forgotten. Yeah. And even though the school isn't open anymore, there will still be lingering effects on all of the people that attended and the lives that those people who are no longer here have touched.
The people that were the abusers, the people that ran the school, they have never been held accountable. And, we've really just scratched the surface, but there are a lot of things that took place there. Some of the staff, were sexually abusive towards residents. There is a particular staff member who he works at a school now, and there's lots of women that he had sexual encounters with, and he is working at a school right now, and in New York. Can I mention the name of the school?
Of course.
The Storm Hill School. It's in New York, and the name of this person is Pete Rowe. So he is working with students. You know, he's a I believe he's a coach at this school, and there are many former residents that have come forward who have said that, you know, he's sexually assaulted them. He needs to be held accountable. He
Absolutely. Yep. And you're so right when you say that. And it's incredible that the ex-residents were able to come together to get the school shut down. But the reason that the work that non-profits like Breaking Code Silence are doing, the reason that work is so important is because there needs to be some type of oversight into these programs to make sure that these staff members don't just go and start working at another program that's similar to the Elan School, or that the Elan School owners can just move to another state where maybe legislation is different and just open up another school that runs in exactly the same way but gives itself a new name.
His name is Peter Rowe, and he works at Storm King School in New York. If you have your children there, be aware that they are in the midst of a sexual predator. And
hopefully, if anybody is listening and they're familiar with that school, then there can be some immediate action taken with that information.
We've been trying.
So I think we've covered everything. We've been through so much. And as you said, we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg. And even if you were to go read the comic and go and watch the documentary, even those things are still, you know, just the very tip. There's so much to unpack, so much to uncover. Hopefully people keep coming forward and sharing their stories, because every single experience that is spoken aloud contributes to changing the institutionalized abuse that's still ongoing in America and across the world.
Speak your truth. If you speak your truth, don't feel shame. Speak your truth, because it's important.
And it can navigate change, as you are a perfect example of. So thank you so much, Rachel, for coming and sharing your story with me. Thank
you, Casey. I appreciate it. I appreciate you letting me on.
For sitting in your car and stowing away to have this candid conversation with me, reliving your experiences, and allowing people to listen to such a raw and private part of yourself, and to help me navigate the time differences, because England to New Zealand is a pretty wild
12 hours
difference. So I appreciate all of those things, and if we receive any feedback from this episode, then I'll be in touch straight away to let you know. And we'll see where it goes. So thank you so much, Rachel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, Casey. You've been a wonderful host.
Thank you so much.
Really
Take care, Rachel. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I am your speaker, Casey, and this has been The Cult Vault.